friends. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Fort Worth Roots. This is a Fort Worth podcast about our community's creators. This is your first time checking us out. You can find us on all podcast players, Stitcher, iHeart, Radio, iTunes, all the stuff. We're there. You can also stream us straight off the website. It's fortworthroots.com. On all the social media accounts, it's Fort Worth Roots. This is the last time we will be talking about this event on our show before it actually happens. The River Oak Springfest Car Show, Saturday, April 30th, held at the beautiful Camp Carter. Use this address to find this place, 6200 Sand Springs Road, Fort Worth, Texas, 76114. And it's a free event. There's going to be vendors, pop-up markets, games and events, 70-plus antique muscle cars, trucks, all the good stuff. I think the most important thing is that it's free, and it's situated right here in the heart of Fort Worth, kind of close to the Naval Air Station. But use the address because it is kind of a booger to find if you've never been there before. Quick shout out to our friends over at Squad STX. You can find them by going to squadstx.com. Simply put, this is a chance to get your boys outside. It was designed by Army infantry officers as an alternative to Boy Scouts. Check out all the details, squadstx.com. If y'all have not yet checked out Monday's episode, I was really excited about this one, and it feels like a special episode because we go into a lot of really interesting details about how the body works and our need for community and all the incredible things that they've been doing out there at Body Machine Fitness. It's episode 77. It's titled A New Addiction, and I'd like you to check it out. And then next Monday, our friend Richard Keller from the band Itchy Richie and the Burning Sensations joins us for his second recording. Also a really fun one. Hope you get to check that out. That's going to be episode 79. That's enough of the news and events. Our guest today is the curator of the Feld podcast. This is not his first go at podcasting, but this is his new baby. And I'm excited about this because he's looking at interviews in a different way. You know, he's doing kind of what Fort Worth Roots is doing, but he's talking to people through a different lens. He's focusing on the failures that they've had, that they've learned from, or maybe are still in the process of learning from. This guy's been a breath of fresh air. It's somebody that I've been able to spitball ideas with and just kind of talk shop with podcasting. And I'm really excited to see what we get into in the future because we're already coming up with some pretty incredible ideas. Now, this is the first time you've heard about this particular guest on the Fort Worth Roots podcast, but we've already done 2 recordings with him. And if you will go check out the Failed podcast, you can find that on Spotify and several other podcast players. We'll have links in the show notes. One of them, if you'll go to the Failed podcast, that's episode 9. That's kind of when we first met. He invited me over to a studio just off of 7th Street area, and we did a quick recording, and then so that's episode 9. And then we did another one this weekend, episode 16, that just released, I believe, today. And so what you're getting in this episode is a little bit unique. Sat down in his studio, and we kind of did his version of the podcast and then my version of the podcast. And that might not make sense now, but as we get into the episode, you'll understand. That's enough out of me. Let's give it up for our guest today, Sam Esquivel. Thank y'all for being here. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Failed podcast. We are back. I hope you enjoyed the few episodes that I just did. They've been exciting. I've been having a lot of fun. And here we go. We have another great episode on hand today. Of course, I'm making that prediction, but we have a local podcaster here in Fort Worth. That's where I live. And he runs a podcast called the Fort Worth Roots podcast. I listen to it and I watch it. He does the podcast thing and the video thing, and it just intrigued me. And then the guy that I'm watching, he just seemed cool, and so I reached out to him. And then now we've been talking podcasts, we've been talking Fort Worth, and we don't know what the future holds for us, but it all begins today on this episode. We're just going to go back and forth. We're going to talk a little bit about podcasting. We're going to talk about his journey. And we hope that you enjoy it. We hope you learned something. We'll talk a little bit about life challenges, hopefully, some failures. So I want to welcome Andrew Turner to the Failed Podcast. How you doing, my man?
Sam, thanks for having me on, brother.
This is going to be exciting. The Fort Worth roots, man. Just let me go ahead and start there. Just drop a plug. And how did you come up with the name? Because there's so much that goes into a name.
I wish I had kept the list of stupid ass names I came up with for the podcast.
Did you waste time making like logos for all of them too,
No,
or did you just the text?
And I really have trouble with the logo. The logo that we're using currently right now, and it's April 2nd, 2022.
Yeah.
That logo, I made that on an app, and it was really just supposed to be a space saver or a holder until I made a real logo.
Yeah.
And I just never have changed it. But Fort Worth Roots, I ended up settling on that because whenever I got down to the brass tacks and started thinking about what is this show really going to be about.
Yeah.
And I tried to tell people in the beginning, this is not a Fort Worth podcast. This is just simply where it started at. And over the last 2 years, it has progressed into absolutely a Fort Worth podcast. And what I found in doing some research and listening to some other smart people in the podcast industry is that I had really made it too vague. I said, okay, this is going to be the Fort Worth Roots podcast. And that just means that it starts in Fort Worth, but who knows? And I'll have anybody on and all the things. And,
you always have to explain it, right? Well, being the failed podcast, I have the same problem. I tell my friends and those close to me, and they're always like, Sam, it's okay to fail, man. If you need anything, we'll help you out, man. What's going on? I say, no, it's just the name of my podcast. It's a challenge. Like, what challenges are you going through? How are you growing? But anyways, there's just so much that goes into a name, and it takes on a life of its own. And I see that's what's kind of happening with you, because for your podcast, we've mentioned in private, it was kind of open. You were going to talk to business people, musicians, and just local people, capture cool stories about Fort Worth. But then all of a sudden, in some of the recent episodes, there seems to be a lot of like singer-songwriters and musicians, but that wasn't the purpose. But that's just where it's ending up. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about how did that happen? How do you feel about that?
Well, it's really cool that you picked up on that, Sam. I didn't want to put us into a corner or put the baby in the box. I wanted it to just kind of naturally grow, and we still have on interesting people from different industries and different walks of life and things like that, but we've really found a home with the local artist community, and musicians. 90% of their job is marketing.
Yeah,
just trying to get their name out there so people will invite them to play at their venues or, whatever. So it's been really easy to make that connection, and these people are so willing to come out and do recordings with me, and so it's just been a really easy partnership between my thing and their thing.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, the most recent recording I did last week was with, make sure I don't mess this up, Body Machine Fitness, I believe is the name of it, BMF, right down the street from you, actually.
Yeah, I saw that. You walked in there.
The place is wild.
I need to check it out. It looked pretty cool. I haven't heard it yet, but I saw it. And you're busy, man. You're knocking it out. You're doing the YouTube, you're doing the podcast on all the platforms. So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. Tell me how those, right before you launched, what did you talk to about your wife or yourself, or what got you to the point that you said, I need to do something, and podcasting is what I want to do. Tell me about how you ended up there.
So let's see. I was probably 28 years old before we started prepping for mobilization to leave country and go over to Kuwait for my second deployment. And in the middle of all this, I decided...
Where did you... Tell me a little about where you served. I had to just cut you off there.
No, that's okay. So 12 years military. I did three active in artillery, and then 9 years in the reserves, working on helicopters. So my second deployment was turning wrenches as a E5 as a sergeant on Blackhawks over in Kuwait.
Yeah.
name of that bass. It's not Arif John. It's I'm drawing a blank, man. I always do this with it. I'll think of it later.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But thank you for your service. I didn't know. It's good to know, man. And so you're starting off, and you're coming back over here from overseas. Continue.
Yeah. So somewhere in the middle of that, I didn't have a lot of free time on my hands. We were doing somewhere between 15-hour and 50-hour shifts, working on these phase birds. And anyway, whenever I did have free time, I was thinking about what I was going to do with my life, because this wasn't going to be it for me. So
Yeah.
I started brainstorming. I came up with a bunch of different ideas. The very first thing was going to be a pressure washing business.
Yeah.
And I was looking for low overhead and low knowledge, something I could just pick up and
That's
run
all
with.
good, man.
I ended up settling on I was just going to try it out. So I got myself a lawnmower, a weed eater, and a broom.
Yeah.
And I starting with friends. I started doing some lawns, and then before you know it, fast forward about 3 years later, I've left the military. I'm on my own. I've got 13 employees. We're doing episodes on national television for HGTV for these flipper flop Fort Worth houses. We're laying sod. We're rearranging flower beds. It got out of control really, really damn fast.
Yeah, but things seem to be going good.
It was, man. It was going really good. I'm not going to sit here and talk numbers, but I was doing good.
Yeah.
And anyway, I got to a point where I didn't want to be doing it at all. And it started just driving me nuts. So anyway, I got out of it. And transitioning out of that business and into a 9-to-5, I say that jokingly because I've never worked a 9-to-5 in my life, but a regular, W-2 job.
Yeah.
Was weird. And I was going through a lot of stuff whenever I decided I needed an outlet. I needed a project.
Yeah.
So I jumped into podcasting because I'd been listening to the Joe Rogan podcast for about 4 years at this point. And I loved the interaction between him and his guests.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to do it on a local level. I was like, you know what? What's stopping me from doing this myself?
Yeah.
So I started it. And I got to tell you, Sam, I had no idea how time consuming this was going to be. But it's been a joy. And it blows my mind that I can sit in front of the computer for 6 hours editing a podcast, working on the show, turning out these episodes.
Yeah.
And I don't mind at all. At no point does it seem like work. And to me, that right there, that tells me that this is where I need to be. This is what I need to be doing.
Yeah. And leading up to that, did you see yourself as a creative, or did you see yourself as a communicator? Did you ever do any speaking or anything? Because there's some things that you kind of have to step in to podcasting with, or did you step in without them and you just developed them because you just wanted to learn it and you wanted to do it?
You're really good at this. You're asking all the right questions. This conversation is going great. Well, yeah. So with my first business, I needed to get into social media because I like I said, I got into it because it was low overhead.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of money for advertising. So I was doing all my marketing myself. So I was making videos. I was on all the little social medias and doing all that kind of stuff. So roundabout way, I was educating myself on the process of, how to upload a video or how to edit a video and all that stuff. And that played into the podcasting situation later. But I think the most important thing that I took away from my time as an entrepreneur in the early days is just the ability to go out there and talk to people, an absolute stranger, and say, hey, I've got this idea. Do you want to get on board with that?
Oh, yeah.
So, and that comes into podcasting whenever you're approaching people either online or in person or by phone and saying, hey, I'm with the Fort Worth Roots podcast. I'd love to have you on my show.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of connecting tissue there.
Yeah. So whenever right now you're obviously well into it, you've asked people to come on your show. More people are asking to come on your show. But in the beginning, it's so hard to approach people and sell your vision whenever there's nothing there yet, right? So can you take us back to like the first 5 episodes? What were some of the things that kind of confronted you and you're like, man, this is dumb, man. Like, what's wrong with people? Or what did you see that you really liked? And you're like, man, I'm so glad that I'm going down this direction.
Yeah. So right out the gate, you got to figure out, how am I going to approach people with this thing? Because I don't have anything to show them, right? I just have an idea.
That's the hardest time.
Yeah. I agree with you, but I was actually surprised at the response I got.
Yeah.
So I'm I'm a prolific Facebook group nerd. I know all about the groups.
Good.
So
Yeah.
so I got out there and I found the local musician groups, because that seemed like a perfect transition.
Yeah.
Or a good starting point.
Yeah.
I went into entrepreneur pages and musician pages, and I just put out a post, said, hey, and I think I had my logo ready by then.
Good.
Maybe, or a version of it.
Yeah.
And I said, this is what I'm doing. I'd be just absolutely honored to have anybody on that would like to get me started.
Yeah.
And that really was an open invite, and I had no idea what I was going to get. And I was very fortunate to have 10 really solid guests that I had on the show from the very beginning. And, after that, it seemed simple.
Now, this day and age, there's everybody and their mom and their sister and their dog have a podcast, okay?
Right.
And it's like so simple to make it. But now that you're doing it, now you have a better understanding that it's not about just launching a podcast, but it's about being able to communicate. It's about being able to tell a story with someone that's on the mic. Tell me a few things that you maybe didn't know, but you learned really quick in those first 10 episodes.
Your equipment is so important, but nothing is more important than making sure that the person you are interviewing can hear their voice. Because, and maybe I'll do a demonstration for your listeners right here. These are dynamic mics, and if you're watching Sam's video, you'll be able to see this, but I'm moving the mic away from my mouth, and now you can't hear anything. But now it's right in front of my mouth again. That's a dynamic mic. That's how they work. Your guest cannot hear that if they don't have the headset on. I know it doesn't sound important to you right now, but if you ever get into podcasting for yourself, you'll know that I'm right really quick. And for anybody that's ever encountered this issue, they're nodding their head right now going, yep.
Yeah, because people will be on the interview and they'll just start talking to you. Like, they'll turn their head and they don't realize, like, you got to be 2 to 3 inches away from the mic in order for it to really be capturing everything.
And I'm over here making out with it. You can see I'm close. I'm about as close as I can get.
So what else? Okay, so you kind of learned mic position. You learned the importance of equipment on a personal level as far as communicating, because you're doing interview style. So you have to not only ask the right questions, but you do a little back check on them if they have a book or if they have music.
Yes.
How do you go about just rolling it out so you kind of have the opportunity to share something new, or maybe broaden the interviewers, your guests' thinking?
So I do try to do some research on them. And for some people that I've had on the show, like they've got a really cool thing going on, but they don't have, like we just talked about, they don't have a lot of history. They're just getting started.
Yeah.
So people like that are kind of hard to investigate, and I don't let that bother me. But I do like to go into an interview prepared. If it's somebody like, Betsy Price, the longest serving mayor of Fort Worth, she's got a lot of history.
Oh, yeah.
So I can do a lot of research on her. Or Ken Scott, that episode's coming out Monday, and he was a Ninja Turtle. He was the original Ninja Turtle from the early 1990 movies.
Really?
Yeah.
The first one?
He was Raphael.
Get out here. He was in the tub. He was the one that got hurt, remember? They beat him up.
Yeah.
I saw it the other day. That's pretty cool, man.
So, people like that, you can do a lot of research on.
Yeah.
And so I come with notes. And Ken Scott, Raphael, he had done so much after the Ninja Turtles that I literally walked in there with like 3 pages of notes. And I'm like, I'm not going to be able to get through all this, because he told me that I had about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So I just try to hit the high notes. But yeah, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it before the interview. And I'd say the most important thing whenever you sit down with a guest, or this, at least for me, Sam, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job.
No, good. I'm listening.
But just, take a moment to kind of comfort them, because a lot of people, this happens all the time. In fact, the guy over there at Body Machine Fitness told me that this was the first time he'd ever done a podcast. And to somebody like me or you, were like, oh, really?
Yeah.
What? But, so you have to take the time to understand that they're sitting down and they might be really nervous.
Yeah.
So I tell all of them, like, this gets edited, okay? This is not live.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that you sound, smart, and I'm going to take out those uhs and those ahs and nasty noises.
Just do it. Be free. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, just try to calm them down.
Okay, so think back to your first episode. Were you nervous? How long was it? Were you able to execute your plan? How was that? Because my first episode for podcasting happened a long time ago, but for the failed podcast, I was looking. I was like, okay, who's going to be my first guest? I asked a few people. And, they get nervous. You want to come on my podcast? And all of a sudden they get nervous. And so finally a friend of mine recommended someone. He's an MMA fighter he doesn't MMA no more, but he's like 4-0 and he trains. He has gyms. And I called him up and I said, hey, dude, I need to get my first guest. Would you be interested? Not only did he say, yeah, but he said, when are you ready to do it? I said, well, we're talking about 2 hours. And he was in. But because he was just so good at it. But I'm so thankful that he was able to do it. He was my first guest. Do you remember your first guest and how you felt whenever you executed that interview?
Yeah, so you don't know what you don't know. I executed it as well as I had planned to execute it. So yes, it went well, but it was an absolute dumpster fire. And so I did this 2 different ways. My first interview is actually episode number 2 on my podcast because I wanted my first interview to be with some friends.
Got it.
So the first episode is actually like the 10th recording. But the first interview that I did was with Lindsay Hightower at a Hightower band. That's a local band here in Fort Worth. And yeah, man, I was so nervous. I was sweating. My palms were sweating.
Yeah.
And I managed. And, once I got back to looking at the recording or listening to the recording, I'm like, okay, I've got to spend some money on some gear because I tried to use LAV mics and my phones. And I had like a tablet and 2 phones and LAV mics. I was using everything I had without spending any money. And once I listened to that audio, I was like, no, well, we're not going to play it like that.
Yeah. I've ended up with so much equipment, but
you were showing me. It's incredible.
On that journey, now I'm capable of doing quick interviews, on the spot interviews, in studio interviews. But I had to progress up from starter kit to now, and I think right now this is like my best setup. And so, well, okay. So tell me about this. So in podcasting, obviously, there's a lot of mistakes that we make. I forget to push record. The sound, my voice is super loud. The guest is super low, and maybe there's some awkward silences or whatever. When you're podcasting, what challenges have you had to learn in your podcasting journey that make you better today?
I could go into some really specific stuff. We're both using the Rodecaster, so there are some specific issues with our equipment that we've managed to figure out along the way. I think that the important thing for anybody getting into it is just to understand your equipment, do everything that you can to, run some test recordings.
Yeah.
Figure it out. And so my first 10 episodes, I recorded 10 episodes before I even went to post edit. And that was such a huge mistake. I should have done a recording, immediately started editing, and then moved on to the next one so that I could refine the process throughout those 10 episodes.
Got it.
But I didn't do that. So I didn't give my chance to progress or excel. And what you're going to find is that there's going to be issues that you need to fix, and then you fix them. Now, something very specific with the Rodecaster, if you kick the power cord out of the wall in the middle of a recording, it will lose the file. So now,
bad day.
What do? You get yourself an external power source and you keep it all together on the table so no one can kick it out. It took me 3 times to learn that mistake. Do not do the same stupid thing 3 times before you take steps.
By the 3rd time, it's your fault.
And by the 3rd time, it will be a really important recording with Fort Worth's newest lacrosse team, a professional sports team that plays at Dickey's Arena. That's the file that you'll lose, and that's whenever you'll really get your shit together and go get yourself an external power source.
Yeah. So, what's your insight, right, or passion for podcasting, and why do you like that platform?
right here, right now, what we're doing, Sam, this is the reason that I keep doing it. I meet awesome people all the time, and I really do. And whenever I hear people talk like this, I'm like, shut up. I don't believe you. You don't sound sincere, but I am being 100% sincere when I say that it's improved my quality of life. Meeting people like you and the guests that I have on my show, the interactions I have with people on the side that have, maybe they're not a guest, but the only reason I'm communicating with them or hanging out with them or talking to them is because of the show. So this podcast has enriched my life.
Yeah.
And I hope that eventually one day other people say that about listening to the show or working with me because of the show. I hope that this is like a net win for everybody that gets involved with the show. I really do enjoy this.
Now, what were some of the goals that you had in the beginning for the Fort Worth Roots podcast, and how have they changed it, or do they continue to be the same?
So I really sincerely tried to go into this without any expectations, because I knew that whenever I launched Fort Worth Roots, there were something like 850,000 podcasts worldwide. Wow. Now those are chump numbers. Yeah. I mean, there's millions after COVID, because it's,
I can imagine how many COVID spit out.
Yeah. You don't need any equipment to do a podcast. You just need an audio file and $15 a month. Yeah. You can do it for free on some platforms.
That's right.
So anyway, I tried to go into it with zero expectations, and let's just try it out and see what happens.
Yeah.
Since then, I've got some pretty lofty goals now.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of this we talked about, but I want Fort Worth Roots to be able to reach as many people as realistically possible. I've got the idea for a mobile podcast studio that I've been talking about since episode 1, and
that'd be cool.
But yeah, I've gone into enough research that I think I've decided what kind of vehicle it's going to be, how I'm going to set it up, what we're going to do with it, things like that. So there have been some, some goals set. I'm saving up for that mobile podcast studio.
I've seen some cool ones. I've seen two types. One is like on a motorized vehicle, like a Sprinter van or something. But then I've seen some lately on a trailer. And so those are pretty cool. But to build that out, that'll be so cool. I hope that you're able to do that here pretty soon, because I know that you're on site to do interviews quite a bit. You know what I mean? You interact with like events and stuff like that. And so, okay, let me ask you this. So you interviewed the mayor, you interviewed musicians, authors. What are some of the things that you do to prepare, or how do you look at yourself as an interviewer, right? Like we're looking into a mirror. Yeah. What do you feel is like your best quality? And then what do you feel like, man, I need to work on this a little bit more? And the only reason I'm asking is because if there's like some young kid listening that wants to be a podcaster, I want them to be aware that, as podcasters, there's things that we're learning and we're like not comfortable with, but we want to get better at it. So what are a few things?
Okay, youngster, listening out there right before your first podcast.
The next Joe Rogan is probably listening, you know?
Well, I'm really impressed with the flow and the tempo of your interview here. You're way better at this than I am. You've just got a natural gift about it. But that's something I need to work on. Is just the flow, the tempo, whatever you want to call it. You've got it down, and so that's something that I really need to work on. Is just, I guess, my mic presence, not my stage presence, but my mic presence. But the thing that I think I've got that a lot of podcasters don't have is that I desire to stay outside of the norm. If, like with Ken Scott, and I'm gonna refer to the same people over and over again because it's fresh on my mind because I've been working on that episode. But with Ken Scott, I got on the internet and found lots and lots of podcasts where he had interviewed and told the exact same story over and over and over again. Yeah. So whenever I sat down with this man that has accomplished so much in his life, I tried to not talk about Raphael, and you could tell it was driving him nuts.
Because he's so rehearsed and he's so comfortable in those parameters.
Yeah. And let me say, Ken Scott is a great dude. Yeah. Super chill, very sincere. He's a warm individual, great guy to be around. So I'm definitely, I don't want anybody to think I'm talking crap
No.
about Ken, but it was, and he even mentioned it after we got done with the recording. He's like, we didn't really talk about Raphael that much. I was like, you are an interesting man, and I wanted to encompass more about Ken Scott than what you've talked about on the other 20 podcasts that you've been on.
Absolutely.
So that's something that I really hunt for. I did the same thing with Betsy Price. You know, people want to talk to her about political policies and things like that, and I didn't talk about any of that.
Yeah.
We talked about her. We talked about her, her young years and coming up as an adult and just stuff like that. You know, what's your favorite place to eat? Stuff like that. So I do try to get the fringe stuff. I want to cover stuff that nobody else is going to cover.
Okay, so we're going to pause right here. Okay, now I'm talking to you. We're not.
Okay.
This is not going to be on the podcast.
Okay.
Here's what I want to do. Okay,
Okay.
I want to come right back if you're okay with it, and I'm going to come back with this. But this time, when I turn it down, I want you to say, "Welcome to the Fort Worth Roots," and just throw me a few questions. And you're gonna now we're gonna do both shows on one, and just do whatever. It can be however long, a few questions or whatever.
Okay.
And I'm gonna answer, and then this episode will be like a dual thing.
Yeah.
And we'll see
Put
how
it
that
on, you
goes.
want to put it on both platforms?
Yeah, well, that's up to you. Do you know what I mean? I think it'll be cool.
Okay.
And I just thought about it right now.
I love it.
So let's try it.
Let's
okay?
do it.
And you just jump when you jump in. I'll turn it down.
Okay.
And it's like 40 seconds long. Let me see how it goes.
Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Fort Worth Roots. I'm here today with our friend Sam. We got connected to talk about the Fail podcast. Did I say that right, Sam?
Yeah, it's the Failed Podcast.
Failed podcast. All right. So I've been looking for people like Sam to connect with inside the Fort Worth area to just kind of bridge the gap, you know, share notes, talk about equipment, the trials and tribulations of a podcaster, and just kind of work with each other, you know, share notes and see if we can't strengthen each other's process and get better at what we're doing by just talking to one another. So that's the idea there. And Sam, thank you for being on the show today, and thank you for having me in your awesome studio, man. This is blowing my mind.
No, I'm glad that we're both here. I think we share in the same appreciation, man. I love what you're doing. I love listening to your podcast. I'm learning with you. Like as you're doing your thing, I'm kind of observing and I'm keeping up with you for a reason.
I hope most of that's not just you're seeing the things that you don't want to do. You're just taking all the bad stuff and going, okay, don't do that.
No, I don't do that because I know that I also have a lot of things to work with. But I feel like it's so important, like when you're doing something that's like a passion project, to find others that share in the same thing and to kind of build community and support each other, not critique each other. I mean, there's a long line for that.
Yeah. Well, you said something important there, queued me up, the community word. It's something that I've been trying to get into. I mean, it's difficult with everything that goes into making a podcast, plus having a regular job, and then trying to get out there and go to these mixers, these meet and greets, whatever you want to call them. I know here Fort Worth does one. Is it every Tuesday? Or not every Tuesday, but the first Tuesday of every month. And I want to go to that one. Hopefully I can make it. I missed last month's. But anyway, just, yeah, like you said, trying to build a community out of this. In my first episode on Fort Worth Roots, that was something that I brought up. That was one of the main ideas, was to build community out of this. And it's been kind of a struggle, man. Yeah.
It's not easy. I know that, because community, you have to find a few things. You have to share something in common. And sometimes that's really focused, that you, in essence, as a result, you can't create community whenever it's super focused. So then you have to think, well, then how can I create community around a podcast? And even though mine has to do with challenges and overcoming, it's lessons in these challenges that I think are universal, that people can use from all ages, all walks of life. And that's what keeps me motivated to continue to interview and share people's perspective on how they lived life. And I think that that's going to help build a community around the Fort Worth podcast, the Failed Podcast.
Yeah, so today we're doing something a little unique. It's certainly unique for me, I think for you as well.
Yeah.
But we're recording here in Sam's studio, and we started off with the Failed Podcast, and now we're moving into the Fort Worth Roots podcast. So we're going to put these up on your podcast as well as mine.
Yeah.
And kind of share our audience with one another. So where can people find your stuff on social media? What are all your...
Well, on social media, I'm on Instagram. It's Sam, or it's the_Feld_podcast. And if you ever had to get social media to promote something, you have to tweak a letter here or add a number because everything's taken up. And as far as podcasting, I'm on all the platforms. Just search the Feld Podcast. You can even type in my name, Sam Esquivel, and it'll pop up.
Yeah, perfect. Earlier we were talking about, you'd asked me where I got the name Fort Worth Roots, but another cool thing that came out of that was when I was trying to pick a name for the podcast, when I typed Fort Worth Roots into all the different social media platforms, nobody had that because it doesn't make any sense, I don't think.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's a great name. It's kind of interesting that it was up for grabs.
I thought it was because I was sure for whatever reason. I mean, because, anytime you're trying to pick a username on any account, it's like, oh, that's taken. So like you said, you got to tweak some stuff, move some letters around, underscores and whatnot. But Fort Worth Roots is available on all the social media platforms because nobody had it. And I could not believe that.
Yeah, that's great.
Sam, you have a crazy perfect voice for podcasting. What your progression through life? Have you done some things career-wise or whatever that gave you that smooth podcast voice?
Well, the voice is just from God, but the development, no, I'm joking. But it's just my voice, right? Obviously, most people that hear their voice, they think it's annoying. My mom was in radio in Fort Worth for 25 plus years. And so I was able to go in the studio with her and watch what she did. And at a young age, I was always, just a smooth talker. You know what I mean? I always figured out a way to communicate my way out of getting in trouble at school, and I would talk in front of people all the time. And then for a long time, I was doing youth ministry, and so I've prepared lessons and taught many, many, many students. And so I always had a mic, or I always had a group around me. And so I kind of had to learn how to just flow when everyone was asleep around me, 'cause, dealing with young people. And so I think that's how it got developed. But I just always felt like Joe Rogan or even Oprah Winfrey and all these people who do interviews. I've always liked that. I've always loved the challenge of helping someone tell the story. But I also knew that I didn't want my voice to interfere. You know what I mean? I wanted it just to kind of flow. And without knowing, I've been working on my on air or, on my audio self. I've been working on it for a long time. And
your mic presence.
My mic presence, man. And that's what I do. And I guess, I don't know, I appreciate it. No, you're the first one to ever tell me that. You know what I mean?
Well, you're going to hear it a lot more because it's just flat out true. So
yeah, so you're listening to the Fort Worth Roots, No, and so I try not, but I make fun of the whole radio voice thing from like back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. You're listening to and all that. And I just try to kind of be me. The way I talk here is the way I talk with someone when I'm having coffee with them. Right. And so because there's not a big gap between my on-air presence and whenever I'm sitting and talking with someone, it's easier for me just to be me.
Right on. Something I was thinking about yesterday was, I don't know if everybody does this, but when I'm alone, I just have conversations in my head. And one of the conversations we were having yesterday, me and myself, is how hard it is to just be yourself in front of the microphone. It is a struggle because what we're doing is not 100% natural, right? We got these devices in front of us. We know that we're performing for an audience that'll listen to this later, maybe for the next 100 years, before the asteroid kills all the dinosaurs. But anyway, it's not totally natural. So you got to find a way to fight the urge to do that crazy radio voice, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know that I'm not there yet, but that's another thing I'm working on, is just trying to cut the bullshit and talk like myself, because you have this natural tendency to try to perform for somebody. And, and I hear it whenever I'm editing these shows in post-production. I'm like, who's that guy? God, man, why am I talking like that? And I get called out sometimes by my friends. They'll give me a call on the phone like, what are you doing with your voice there? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why that happened.
I laugh because I know.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So for me, I understand the struggle first and foremost, but so I've been working on like obviously writing. Okay, so I write a lot, so I understand. Like I can translate like my thought into writing pretty seamlessly. It's not two different people that are showing up. So I've learned to be able to write how I communicate, and I've also read, you know, a, let's just say I had a talk for 30, 40 minutes and I've written it word for word.
Damn.
And it flowed the way that I talked. Yeah. And it flowed the way that I communicate. So that's another thing that I've taught my brain when it comes to me talking is I talk the way that I sound. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I'm not thinking a different way. And I think that helps whenever I'm communicating. And I listen to a lot of auditors and the way that they communicate. And I always think about it one way. When I'm preparing, I say, okay, can I carry this whole podcast or this whole interview on my own? And I have to get to that point because if the guest has a hard time sharing, I need to always be ready. But at the same time, I love storytelling and I love what I don't know about the guest. So I'm always willing to stop and pivot, but I always have a spot where I'm ready to land on if things kind of go a different direction or if I feel like they're a little uncomfortable or lost. But that all just happens from everything that I've done up to now, and narrating and interviewing has been my main focus. I hardly ever, unless I'm teaching and I got the mic, it's hardly ever me. I'm always helping someone tell their story. And so I think that that's another part of it that I enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I'm very impressed with your skills. Hats off to you, sir.
Well, thank you.
You know what you're doing. So you said your mom was a radio host here in Fort Worth for 25 years?
25 plus years. A long time ago in the Spanish Christian community, there was a radio station called Radio Luz. It was one of the first ones in the Metroplex. And through her church, her pastor allowed her to come on their, paid slot. And that's when it started. But as a kid, she dreamed of her voice traveling in the air. Okay. Now, keep in mind that she's from Mexico. My mom didn't grow up with a lot of money. So those things were so out of reach that there's no way that that's what she dreamed of based on how she grew up. And so she just knew when she was a kid that she was going to do something where her voice was going to be carried through the air. And so ended up being in radio. After that, she had a show. She's interviewed singers and preachers from all around the world, and she's been on TV, and she's a communicator. You know what I mean? And she didn't finish school, and like I said, she grew up very, very poor, and she's kind of like I'm kind of like her, and I've heard thousands of hours of my mom talking. Whether it be video or audio, I've seen and heard my mom, and I don't know, it's just rubbed off on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems that way.
That's wild, man. That's a crazy story. It really makes you wonder. There's so many stories like that. I don't have any myself, but the next plane of existence, or that ethereal fabric that we can't see or don't have the technology to perceive. I dig stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's wild to think about outside of the woo woo. If you can keep yourself from getting too far into it to where you're putting a tinfoil hat on, but just to take that information and maybe we don't understand it, but it's cool to hear stories like that.
And I grew up and I was dyslexic, okay, and I struggled all the way when I started school. Man, I had trouble reading and writing. Forget communicating, man. I mean, I was like, but I developed communicating because I was trying to hide all my other weaknesses. But then technology came in, and typing and all these word processing programs, they helped me kind of work past my weakness. And in my later years, I started developing the things that I really struggled with when I was young. And so I just paid attention to it, and I said, okay, so now I strengthen where I was weak because I focused on it. And that's how I look at what I'm doing. It's just like, I can't get worse. I'm going to keep learning. And that's what keeps me going. I feel like I'm talking to my younger self and saying, dude, like people are labeling you like you're just dumb. And this English was my second language. That's how they labeled me in school. And I grew up here, and I'm just like, no, no, my first language is, but that's my, you know what I mean?
That's racist.
I'm like, dude, get out of here, man. I carry that with me. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to let it get me mad. But whenever I hear that, I'm just like, no. And so my first language is my voice, and it just happens to come out in English. I can communicate it in Spanish, but I don't, I'm my first language. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just felt like they overlooked it when I was young, and here I am. I can talk for an hour straight and not take a breath.
Yeah. Well, Fort Worth Roots podcast is perfect for you then, because we've had recordings go like 4 hours.
You're usually long format. I see
ridiculous.
That. But I like long format. I picture people listening to the Feld podcast when they're driving, when they're in traffic, and they're like, I'm heading home. I have an hour to listen to it. I like that. I like long format.
Yeah, let Sam get you home. 2 things on what you just covered. First of all, a lot of successful creators, maybe they're in the movies, or there's people that got podcasts, whatever their field of expertise is, but learning disabilities tend to make some pretty interesting creators, or whatever you want to call it. People that have those challenges at an early age end up progressing far past their disability and into some pretty incredible. I think Albert Einstein might have even been dyslexic. There are some really interesting people throughout history that have had those learning disabilities, and I think that it forces that person at a young age to perform at a higher level than their peers. So, yeah, to your younger self, don't let anybody talk shit to you, because you're busy perfecting something that is really going to pay off.
Yeah, and I mean, it bothered me. Like, everything that's set up is not set up for me as a younger person to succeed. Dude, struggle all the way, man. Like, and to think that the stuff that I've written, read in front of people. If we were reading in a classroom and I saw it, okay, I'm fifth, I better go to the restroom, or I better get in trouble before it gets to me, because I'm going to have to read out loud and everyone's going to see how dumb I am. And I would avoid it, man. And I became a pro at avoiding it. And now, I can recall many times when I said, okay, here we go. I'm going to read this in front of, 100, 200 people. And I'm going to go. And I have. And I mess up every now and then, but I'm literally conquering, the old Sam, the person that was so, like, my self-esteem was so low. And so I make it a priority, man, to be confident in reading what I write.
Well, you're a solid dude now, and you have no trouble speaking. So
you're
doing good, man. You're doing good. So we talked about your mom, 25 years in the radio, but what I was trying to lead into with that was you've lived here your entire life?
Yeah, born and raised in Fort Worth, and I'm here for now.
You've seen the changes that have gone on.
I have seen
here in the area.
I've seen the neighborhoods vanish. I've seen the new freeways pop up. I've seen developments. I've all the way from friends, living in a certain house, selling it because the market went up, and then I've seen it all, man. Mayors and schools, and Fort Worth has changed, and I think it's changed for the better. There's many opinions on that, but I think that the growth is all around us, and I think it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. The only thing I worry about is losing the kind of essence of Fort Worth. I mean, this is such a unique place. And for anybody, excuse me, for anybody looking at it from the outside, maybe they're just reading about Fort Worth, and it doesn't seem to be anything special. But you get here and you start communicating with people, and just seeing how people are here. There's something tangible. There's a quality.
I agree.
To that experience that it's the people in the area, but it's not just the people like you, Sam, that have been here their entire lives. people move here from other places and they kind of adapt to that. Like there's something in the water. You know what I mean?
Well, I've always said that Dallas is a city and Fort Worth a town. That's how I've always looked at it.
Yeah.
But we're slowly we're growing. I just my thing
And
is just like
fast.
keep the buildings low, spread out, and I think that'll help.
Why do you think we should keep the buildings low?
Well, you think of a city and you think tall buildings and very congested, and then parking, and then people, and then but if you spread it out a little bit, you can kind of maintain that
Okay.
walk from here. The traffic's not so heavy. There's still ways to park and do things, and you go to Dallas, that's vanishing. Like it's very difficult to move around within the city, but in Fort Worth, you can still do it. You can still park somewhere, walk, and it works out. But that's a town thing. And a city thing, that doesn't exist.
Well, if you're a fan of history at all, you can look back and see that humans tend to repeat the same patterns no matter what.
Yeah.
So if you want to see what's happening to Fort Worth, or what's going to happen to Fort Worth, you can look to any other city that has grown past Fort Worth's level and see kind of a blueprint for what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And our city managers, the people that plan the roadways and approve certain businesses for certain buildings and things like that, those people can guide based off of those blueprints and try to make it whenever it gets to the point to where it is where Dallas is in 2022.
Yeah.
It might be 2065 before we get to where Dallas was in 2022, but
True.
it could happen.
Yeah.
And hopefully the people that are planning our infrastructure have enough foresight to kind of, when we get to that phase, it's obvious that we thought it out.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your studio here. Now, is this all you're doing here at this office? We're just off of 7th Street, for those of you listening, close to the post office. I won't give them the exact address, but over here in this area. How did you get set up with this? Are you just using this for a podcast studio?
Well, so I have a business, and so the idea was that we were going to run some meetings and then keep our paperwork here. But then my wife got busy with other things, and then I got busy outside of the office. And so I was already doing the podcasting, but I would just figure out other locations and places to do it. And then I started thinking about, what am I going to do with this space? And this just came to mind. I always wanted a spot where I can just kind of leave my equipment set up. I can just walk in, push record. And that's why I've made it. And as you can see, I have like 2 lounge chairs on one side and a couch on the other. And then my desk is on the other side. And my goal is to be able to have a different scene for like YouTube on one side and have 3 different scenes for YouTube in here. And so that's the goal. And
So you could be set over there and use those 2 chairs. You can be set up like this.
yeah, this one would be like Johnny Carson,
Yeah.
Boom. And then that one, I just need, it's a white wall behind you, but maybe like you had the Fort Worth Roots thing. I like that banner.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll get a banner to go there so that we can just it's basically like plug and play.
Consider maybe having one of these local artists do a mural for you.
I might. I'm actually talking to a muralist right now who does huge murals, and I'm going to bring him on the show. And I'm going to talk to him about his journey as an artist and, just trying to keep that business going and all the challenges that he's been through as a muralist. And so I might have him come in here and knock something out.
Okay. Now, if that doesn't work out, let me know because I have 2 incredible muralists.
Yeah. Are they Fort Worth based?
Uh-huh.
Any mural that I would drive by every day?
A brand new one is right off of, what is that main road that runs by the base? Over there.
White Settlement Road.
Is that White Settlement?
Well, it goes White Settlement, and then it's Altamere.
Yeah, so it might be White Settlement
because they connect like this.
Yeah, it's Boulevard Brew is they're the ones paying for this mural. No, or it might be the city. It doesn't matter. Anyway, Trista Morris has this beautiful mural that she just put on the side of Boulevard Brew right off of that road that I can't think of the exact name of, but runs through River Oaks. And she has spent so much time on this thing, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Nice.
And a lot of detail. Yeah, it's got the it's the Wizard of Oz theme. So you got the Tin Man and Dorothy, the lion. And this might sound familiar because it was on the news the other night.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna look for it because I like looking. Well, I love the arts, and so muralists, they're starting to pop up more in Fort Worth, and I think it helps, when you're driving and you see the side of these buildings. I like it. I don't mind at all, and so
No, it's great.
I'll look for that one.
Yeah, and then I just interviewed a friend of my fiance's. Her name is Kiki, and she did all the murals. I don't know that she did all of them, but she did a bunch of the murals out at Sequest at the Ridgemar Mall. So if you're ever going in there, and that is a really cool place too.
Yeah.
Anyway, she went in there and did a bunch of murals on those walls, and those walls are, twice the size of your biggest wall in here.
Yeah, they're big.
They're pretty good size, and I don't know how long we probably talked about it in that episode, how long it took her, but I mean, those murals, those are Trista, I think, has been working on her mural for better part of a month and some change. It takes a lot of work, and she's had people out there helping her, like, cover in some of the large areas, the spots that just need to be filled. So you got friends and people from the community out there with paint rollers helping her.
Nice.
And even with all that help and scaffolding and anyway, it takes a long time to do something like that.
So maybe I'll get a digital artist to do something here. I get a muralist here. They'll be here for a month. I'm like, nah, man, I need something quick, man. I need it like tomorrow.
This is a room inside of a building. It's not the side of a building, so maybe it wouldn't take quite as long.
But no, this is my space. I'm fortunate to have it. And I just want guests to feel comfortable to come in here and have a seat and just, get in the zone, man. And dig in on the interview.
It's super comfortable, and I'm envious. Because I want to set up my space to be comfortable like what you got going on here. This is so great. And I'm sitting on kind of like a futon couch, I think.
Yeah.
I saw one of the hinges in between the cushions earlier, but it doesn't feel like a futon. It's super comfortable.
Yeah, it's a small space, so my furniture is small, but it looks big. And so those chairs, they're small, but but they're comfortable.
Yeah.
And this is small. It was actually in an RV. That's how small it was. And so I was like, I need to get something that's small, not bulky, so we have room to kind of move, because it gets small in here really fast.
Yeah. Do you have an RV?
No, I bought it from this older couple, and they were like, no, we don't need it. And so that's how I got it.
Everything needs a story. So with your podcast, now this is your second podcast that you put together. Where do you see this thing kind of turning into, mutating or growing into, or have you pretty much ironed out the trajectory?
Yeah, no, not ironed out, because I know things can pivot, but the goal is to just interview people that have gone through something, and in those interviews, being able to pull out some nuggets, man, pinpoint some things that they've learned that can translate or can help someone younger on their journey. And their journeys may not be going to the same place, but the lessons that we learn whenever we fail are valuable. And so ultimately my goal is, like, I can imagine myself having, 200 episodes, and I'll be able to kind of itemize them and say, man, this is how people have overcome bad partnerships in business. This is how they've overcome losing people close to them. And this is how they've overcome dropping out of college and all this stuff, and what they've gained and come out of it. And so I feel like it's going to be a resource for people. And ultimately I'm putting this out there today, but I hope that it turns into a book that you can read and it kind of help you overcome challenges, you know. And
are you going to be writing this book?
I am. But it'll include everything that I'm doing on the podcast. Not only this one, but my previous ones. I did some leadership stuff. I've produced other podcasts, and so I would love to do that, and have workshops in schools and stuff. And me and my wife have a nonprofit, and it's called Cultivate Leadership Project. And so this is kind of a branch from that, because in leadership, like, it's important not only to handle failure, but to accept that you're going to fail. And leaders that think that everything's going to be perfect and that they want everything to run a certain way, like, they're kind of setting themselves up to fail, but they're delusional about it. And so I think that this is Cultivate Leadership Project, but I think that it's evolving. And then this is a brand of it. And that's why the Fail podcast it's got a place in my heart, because I'm a professional I'm a professional at failing. This past 2.5 years, going through COVID and everything, like I've had a lot of challenges, and I've had to overcome them, and I'm barely getting on my feet now. And I kept looking at what am I going to do next? Like, it's hard to talk about leadership right now because of everything that's changed in my life. And it's the one thing that kept popping up is, well, I failed at this, I failed at that, and I had to kind of turn that into a positive.
Yeah,
and that's where I'm at.
well, that's awesome. Well, one thing for sure, I'd like to have you and your wife on to talk about your nonprofit sometime for the Fort Worth Roots podcast.
Yeah.
But the other thing that you're just talking about, unfortunately, but fortunately for the podcast, unfortunately for humanity, you're never going to run out of guests, because with every single person walking around, you've gotten a library of failure
That's
experiences. True. The older they are, the more they're going to have, and that's just part of life. You know?
And that's what I noticed. So I bring it up with friends. And before I'm talking leadership and I'm talking success, and they would open up, but there was something missing there. I felt like it's kind of boring to me, man. Like, and then now that I'm bringing up the failed podcast, the idea of failures, even my close friends, they're telling me things that they've never told me, because they're like, "Oh, dude, would this be good for the podcast?" And they tell me, I say, "Dude, no, don't share that with nobody." No, but it opens it up, and I kind of like the psychology behind that, and then and so I'm kind of riding that wave, and I'm like, people want to share what they've gone through because they've learned from it, you know, and so I want to explore that a little bit more.
Yeah, well, it's just socially, or in our society, we're taught not to talk about that kind of stuff. I think, you know, you don't want to put anybody out, and you don't want to sound like you're crying about it. But, you know, in order to reach a point of success, you do have to fail. That's life's best educator.
Yeah.
And there's so many stories, and I love seeing this when it pops up on social media. But, you know, just a list of the very accomplished people, and then next to their name, you know, all the just terrible stories of their failures. And you look at that and you go, damn, that's incredible. I mean, in all of the big name people like Oprah and Steve Jobs, I mean, every single one of those people, they have a story of how they just, you know, it looked like they screwed up so bad they'd never recover. I'll never financially recover from this, as Tiger King would say.
How many times have you heard that?
Yeah.
And then what does it spit out? An individual that, in some cases, obviously, respects money, understands, you know, what it takes to save money, but you don't plan that. And sometimes failing at something miserably, it just makes you better, man. And so here I am, just trying to make the world a little bit better by sharing the failures that we all go through.
Well, and Sam, what we're doing is so similar in type, because we're getting people's stories and we're sharing them with our audience. But just like history can be told through a different lens, either through music, you can tell the story of a historical chapter in life through the lens of music, or you can tell the historical story of a different chapter in our history through sports, or whatever you want to do. And what you and I are doing is we're telling people's stories through a different lens. We're kind of doing the same thing, but you're telling it through failure, and I'm telling it through whatever. I don't know. What would you say my lens is?
It's just, I think you just have a podcast. It's like interview style. Yeah, so you're going to promote what someone's doing now, but you find different avenues to help them share that story or that perspective.
Oh, you know what it is? It's Fort Worth. That's my lens.
That's your lens,
That's the lens right there.
No, I love it, man. It's good. Good stuff.
Well, Sam, I can't thank you enough for inviting me into your studio today and showing me all your badass gear and introducing me to your audience. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
and,
thank you, man.
I'm really, really, really glad that we got connected, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. If you got a project that you're working on, if you just need an extra set of hands to hold a camera or whatever, I'm here for you, and Fort Worth Roots will be cheering you on the whole time.
Well, the Fellow Podcast is here for you, and if you're listening, this is hopefully you see more collab work between our two podcasts. we, it's important. We talked about community in this episode. It's like a dual episode, like 2 in 1. And it's important to build community. So thank you for accepting my likes and stuff on your social media and reaching back out to me, and that we're here today and we got an opportunity to talk and to know each other. And we'll see. Let's put Fort Worth on the map. You know what I'm saying? I know we ain't in Austin, but we're pretty close. You know what I'm saying? And so we can give Joe Rogan a run for his money.
He can have Austin.
Maybe we can try to together get him on this episode.
Oh yeah, Joe Rogan will be at the Dickies Arena on 4/20.
Oh yeah,
you can't get tickets anymore. It sold out the day it went up, but he will be here.
Well, then that's we need to figure out a way to record him that day. He might have five minutes to spare somewhere.
Yeah, well, I'll send him an email.
Yeah. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in to this unique episode of the Failed Podcast and
Fort Worth Roots.
I hope you enjoyed what we talked about. We just wanted to get to know each other a little bit more on air, but at the same time, we wanted to learn from each other and support each other. Till the next time, enjoy yourself, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye. And that's a wrap. We did it. We made another Thursday episode. Sam, thank you for being on the Fort Worth Roots podcast. This was an interesting episode. We did something I haven't done before. It's been good to sit down with this dude and just talk shop, talk about equipment, talk about some things that have gone right, things that have gone wrong, and just kind of have some support from somebody. I've got other podcasters out there that I talk to semi-frequently, but I think me and Sam are both on the same page. Excuse me. We want to kind of build a community, not just with our listeners, but we'd like to reach out to local podcasters and see what we can get going. Sam actually mentioned this weekend when we were doing a podcast or a recording that he wants to get some other podcasters involved, do like a mixer or a meet and greet or something. Just get some people together and be all nerdy and podcastery and just introduce ourselves. So we'll see how that goes. I'm looking forward to details with Sam about that idea, because he's kind of the one coming up with it. So anyway, I'll share that with you. We will be reaching out to local podcasters. If y'all want to join us, cool. If not, you probably will later. I'm anticipating. This is good stuff. So, all right. Well, guys, gals, River Oaks Springfest Car Show. I know, but this is literally the last time you're going to hear me talk about it before the event. So, we did it. We made it through a month and a half to 2 months of me squawking about this event. So, if you can make it out, great. If not, no hard feelings. There are going to be more events where we are going to be asking you guys to come out. This one's really important to me because Darren Houck and his wife, actually his whole stinking family, have been extremely supportive of the show. And I'd love to see this go off well for them. Darren's talked about maybe making this an annual event, depending on how well this one goes. So, it's going to be a good deal. It's 300 and something acres. It's just a really beautiful property, and I'm excited to see what's going on. I actually don't know exactly what the setup's going to look like, but I know there's a lot of people that are extremely invested in this and hoping that it works out well. And all I want from you is to stop by, take a picture, say hello, and then maybe pick up your Fort Worth Roots International Fan Club certificate that I am still working on. Actually, I have not started working on it, so I should probably get hot on that. Anyway, it's going to be good. And this was always supposed to be the first event. We made it out to the Psychedelic Panther thing, which was awesome. I just out of nowhere got invited to this thing. And anyway, so that ended up being the first event that we went to. But this is something that we've been invested in for a very long time. So it'd be good to see you. You know the address, you know all the details. I don't need to talk any more about that. I agree. Okay. Go check out Sam's podcast, The Failed Podcast, and there will be links in the show notes if you can't find it, because there are a couple of different podcasts that have very similar names. So, all right. I hope you're having a good week. We made it. We did a Thursday episode, and I will see you Monday. I will have Richard Keller on from Itchy Richie and the Burning Sensations. The dude is just a lot of fun to talk to, and he's putting out some incredible music. So we'll see how much of that we can squeeze into the episode, because I'm pretty sure he sent me some tracks. All right. That's it. Y'all are the best. Thank you, and I'll see you Monday. Peace.